kunne være en slags nordisk felles språkforståelsesånd og holde sitt innlegg på engelsk.
Hello, I'm quite sure you wouldn't understand my Danish. I teach criminology to American students in Copenhagen, and that has made me aware what a role model you are to the world. All my students come to my course with links to stories about Bastoy and Halden, where staff and prison governors have done a fantastic job explaining to the world why it is that you do what you do in Norway. And they may not understand it at first, my students, but they do get to understand why it is we do what we do in Scandinavia normally. At least after a semester, they want to do it at home too. So I'm very, very sorry, as you must be, about this proposal about sending prisoners to the Netherlands. And I'm thinking that this may mean that the new role model in the Nordic countries is not anymore. It's not anymore Norway. It must be Finland, because Finland didn't just reduce the prison population back in before the 80s. They've also done it again. They had an increase in the prison population some years back, and they were very concerned about that, and they took initiatives to bring it down again. So it's possible to do that, and Finland could be a role model for both you and us. But actually, we don't need that right now, because it's not just Sweden and the Netherlands that have free capacity. We do too, and it's been a surprise to us. So we have actually had to close quite a few remand houses and other wards in Denmark. And I'm thinking that as it's been a surprise to Denmark, maybe you have such a fall in store too. And I think that's something to look into. Something else to mention is that maybe one has to assume the vocabulary of the right in order to make them understand why it is important to have humaneness in prisons and why it is important to decrease the prison population. I'd recommend having a look at the American Right on Crime. They are the conservative movement for prison reform, and they actually have supporters like Jeb Bush and Newt Gingrich. They talk about, for instance, the overcriminalization of drugs. They have a lot of vocabulary that one can take and use, and that goes well with people who support things like sending prisoners to the Netherlands. And I think that maybe that can help sometimes to use a different vocabulary to make people follow what you mean. Finally, I was thinking that when you're looking at what to do with your capacity, maybe it's also worth having a look at what is in store for you, whether you're going to have the same kind of development as we have had in our street gang environment. Because we have had the situation in the last few years in Denmark that there are a number of small groupings that can't be placed together. And unfortunately, it changes every day who is an enemy of who. And that means that we have to move people around a lot. And if the same thing lies in store for you, maybe you need to consider that when you are building new places or something like that. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope that you will continue to be a role model and in the Finnish way then.